All right, if I could get your attention, please. Well, thank you all again for joining us. I'm James Person. I direct the Hyundai Motor Korea Foundation Center for Korean History and Public Policy. And some of you may have heard this joke before, but we really do need an acronym for this, so if you have any ideas, let me know. It's a great pleasure to have you all here for the Korea Global Forum and for this luncheon speech by Ambassador Sung Kim. Ambassador Kim is the special representative for North Korea policy and Deputy Assistant Secretary for Korea and Japan. Last week was his one-year anniversary in this position. Congratulations. Before that, he was, of course, the ambassador of the United States to South Korea, a position that he held from November 2011 to October of 2014. While serving as ambassador, he was also the special envoy for the six-party talks. Before that, Ambassador Kim was the chief of the Office of Korean Affairs at the Department of State, a position he held from August 2006 to July 2008. He also served in a variety of positions in the East Asia Pacific region, including in Tokyo and Kuala Lumpur and Hong Kong. Perhaps the one image, as a historian, the one image that I can't get out of my head of Ambassador Kim is of him walking with boxes of documents from North Korea. I have been trying to get documents from the North Koreans for a long time now. And I just can't tell you how envious I am that you, and so when can historians get a look at those? But Ambassador Kim, we're grateful that you're here to speak to us, and he's agreed to take some questions, but will then have to depart immediately after that session. So, Ambassador Kim, welcome to the Wilson Center. Welcome back to the Wilson Center, I should say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, James. Delighted to be with you and all of this distinguished guests here. Well, let me first thank the Wilson Center for organizing this, and of course the Ministry of Unification of the Republic of Korea that's sponsoring it, and the Gyeongnam University. Especially when I mention President Park Jae-gyu of Gyeongnam University. For those of you who have followed inter-Korean relations, he is a very well-known personality. In fact, the leader. I often tease him that he's the godfather of inter-Korean relations. So, President Park, I think you need to work a little harder to get more robust sentiment going on inter-Korean relations. Also delighted to see Ambassador Roy, one of our best diplomats, someone I respect greatly, and two very distinguished Korean American scholars, Dr. Yang and Dr. Kim, here with us as well. Really great to have this opportunity to talk about a topic that matters not only for the U.S.-Korea alliance, but I believe for the peace and stability of the whole region. And it's always nice to see members of the Korean and Japanese press corps as well. They seem to have turned out quite robustly. Pretty slow news day, huh? In the decades since the tragic Korean War, we have seen a tale of two Koreas that went down very different paths. Today, South Korea is an economic powerhouse, a center of advanced technology that empowers its citizens to innovate, learn, create, and succeed. And anyone who knows South Koreans knows that South Koreans are passionate people who do not hesitate to make their views known. And South Korea's democratic society allows those debates to happen and informs the actions of a responsive government. Internationally, South Korea is a widely respected country for its successful path to development and its positive contributions to global efforts on everything from health security to non-proliferation. On the other side of the 38th parallel, North Korea is isolated from the international community. Its people are suffering from decades of grave human rights abuses as the regime prioritizes the development of dangerous and unnecessary capabilities. In North Korea, there is no Samsung or Gangnam Style or Kakao Talk. And South Korea's GDP per capita of around $35,000, of course, far exceeds North Korea's estimated GDP of mere 1,800. But it's not just about companies or social media or numbers. Sadly, for North Korean citizens, there is no freedom, no opportunity, no basic human rights. These are obviously very different paths taken on two sides of the 38th parallel. But they were not the result of cruel coincidences or the vagaries of geopolitics. The South Korea and North Korea of today emerged from the choices that their leaders made based on very different set of values. This contrast is important because successful Korean reunification will be based on choices that reflect a clear sense of what values we should seek in a unified Korea. These are values that have been critical to the success not only of the Republic of Korea, but of course of the United States. These are values our countries share very deeply together. That's why the United States has firmly and consistently supported the Republic of Korea's efforts on Korean unification. We have welcomed Seoul's vision of a peacefully reunited Korea based on democratic and free market principles. And I can tell you that as someone who has worked on these issues for many years, maybe too long, there is no daylight between Washington and Seoul when it comes to inter-Korean relations. Seoul's principled and tireless efforts demonstrate a real commitment to improving inter-Korean relations, and we hope that North Korea will reciprocate these efforts in kind. We are also deeply moved by the humanitarian tragedy of separated families. The reunions held by North and South Korea in late October were a step in the right direction, and we hope these reunions will happen more frequently and regularly. There are obviously many challenges and many opportunities associated with the complicated question of Korean unification. As the distinguished experts here consider these issues in detail, I want to just talk about a couple of broader points that have to do with our investments on the peninsula that will help support Korea's efforts towards unification in the long run. The first investment we're making is in a strong and comprehensive U.S.-Korea alliance. Our alliance has its roots in the defense of South Korea against the North Korea threat. That remains the foundation of our alliance, and we continue to modernize our security alliance to meet the needs of the 21st century. However, it's important to recognize that the expansion of our alliance today, including dynamic economic and people-to-people ties, and cooperation in new frontiers, such as health, security, and environment, shows that our alliance has strategic relevance well beyond the North Korea threat. On the economic front, we can see the strength of our partnership in the sales of everything from Florida orange juice to American cars in Seoul, and of course kimchi in Washington, and in the billions of dollars invested by Korean companies like Samsung, Hyundai, and Doosan here in the United States. In fact, I believe the economic partnership is one area where the impact of the alliance can be felt most directly by the average American and the average Korean. For example, Hyundai Motors' billion-dollar plant in Alabama employs more than 3,000 Americans and relies on 72 suppliers who also invest and create jobs here in the United States. This shared prosperity comes in large part thanks to our high-level, high-standard Korea-U.S. free trade agreement, which reduces tariff barriers on our goods and services to maximize the benefits of our market to each other. And we will continue to work very hard together to make sure that the FTA is implemented fully and faithfully. We're also taking our alliance cooperation into new frontiers. During President Park's recent visit to Washington, we agreed to intensify our cooperation in areas such as health security, technology, development, and the environment. And just one example, the U.S. National Institute of Health and the Korean National Institute of Health signed a letter of intent in October to enhance our biomedical research cooperation. And it's not just the interactions between our governments or companies that make the U.S.-Korea alliance so strong. What makes our alliance particularly enduring are the powerful bonds of friendship and affinity between our peoples, which can outlast the ups and downs of any state-to-state partnership and the shifts of geopolitics. Korean universities partners with us Korean universities partner with over 130 US universities, and Korea continues to send us more students per capita than any other country. And increasingly, American students are benefiting from experiences in Korean universities like Yonsei and Gyeongnam. It is this strength and depth of our alliance that gives us confidence that our country's partnership will endure beyond unification or the disappearance of the North Korea threat. Peaceful reunification will validate decades of US investment in South Korea and demonstrate that our alliance continues to serve broader purposes, ensuring stability and prosperity in the region and around the globe. The second investment we're making in the future of the Korean Peninsula is our support for Korea's increasingly active role in the region and beyond. South Korea's growing regional and global role is, in a way, an important investment in the international support and domestic expertise necessary for peaceful unification. South Korea's positive contributions and active diplomacy have strengthened its international reputation. Korea's proactive diplomacy is gaining friends for Korea and elevating Korea's status in the international community. And South Korea's global efforts are also increasing the expertise and capabilities in many very important areas. When KOICA sends teams to assist in international disaster relief operations, and when Korean medical personnel help combat Ebola in Africa, it accomplishes two critical objectives. Number one, helping those in need. Number two, gaining expertise in humanitarian assistance and health security. When the ROC sends peacekeepers overseas, those forces come back home having been tested in difficult and unstable situations. When South Korean scientists and researchers cooperate with scientists around the world on building sustainable cities and addressing pollution, they develop expertise that will help address questions of quality of life in a unified peninsula. So, the ROC's increasing active role on the global stage, along with our efforts to strengthen the US-Korea alliance, is a sound investment in the future of Korea. Now, let me conclude by stating once again an obvious fact, that the United States continues to support firmly and strongly Korean unification. And the pain of division on the peninsula is something that is increasingly known and understood by Americans. Just a couple of weeks ago, the Washington Post featured a story about a young father who made a big promise to his daughters that he would buy them 2 pairs of nice red shoes, one for each daughter. But before the father could follow through on the promise, the Korean War began, and the family was torn apart. 65 years later, a worried 98-year-old man named Koo Sang-yeon arrived at the Mount Kumgang Resort to participate in the latest round of family reunions. And in his hands were 2 pairs of nice red shoes, one for each daughter. Now, many of us become cynical with old age and experience, but you cannot feel not touched by a story like that. And that is just one of many. Stories like Mr. Koo's illustrate that the vision of the Korean Peninsula and the aspirations for unification are not abstract concepts. Geopolitics has tremendous impact on the life and security of human beings. And that is why it is so important that we get the values underlying the Korean Peninsula right. Because the choices we make about what values we value will shape the future of the Korean Peninsula. I often like to finish conversations about unification by remembering what President Obama said in Seoul a few years ago. He was giving a speech at the Hankuk University of Foreign Studies, and in the audience were some North Korean defectors, and he was talking to them. And he said, addressing these North Koreans who risked their lives to find freedom and opportunity in the South, the president said, "In your life stories, we see the truth. Koreans are one people, and if given the chance, if given their freedom, Koreans in the North are also capable of great progress." And I sincerely hope that that day will come soon. Thank you very much.
So we do have some microphones in the room then. So just raise your hand and wait to be called on. And then once you are, please introduce yourself.
I don't know, reporters allowed to ask the first question?
Hold on a second.
No, no.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. My name is Jae-Sun Jang, Yonhap News Agency. After summit talks with President Park Geun-hye, President Obama said he expects South Korea to speak out when China violates international law. After the summit, Korean Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se, Defense Minister Han Min-gun, they attended some meetings in Southeast Asia. They called for freedom of navigation. Are you satisfied with the way South Korea is dealing with this issue?
First of all, as you know, the president was making a general, straightforward point that when we, both the United States and our good partner, Republic of Korea, notice that countries are not acting consistent with the international norms and principles, I think we have a responsibility to speak out. I believe Korean authorities have made clear their concerns about some of the developments that we're seeing in the region. You don't seem satisfied, huh?
Ask too many questions. President Obama has said he supports President Park's unification initiative, most specifically the Dresden Initiative. What are some of the specific things American administration is doing to make it happen?
First of all, I think our coordination, cooperation, and communication on all things related to North Korea is very tight. I mean, we, at all levels, I think our communication with South Korean counterparts very strong on all aspects of our North Korea policy. As you know, we've stated very publicly our strong support for President Park's vision of peaceful reunification based on free market principles, democratic values, etc. And I think we will continue to support South Korea's efforts as it moves towards that very important goal. But I do think it's important to recognize that this is the Korean Peninsula. I think developments on the peninsula should obviously have South Korea in the lead. But we will be supporting very actively, very robustly, in all aspects of South Korea's North Korea approach.
Thank you, Ambassador. My name is Junpei Yoshioka from Japanese Public TV NHK. One more very important relationship for the region's stability, ROK in Japan, I think. How do you evaluate the current summit between President Park and Prime Minister Abe and about the history issues? What the United States expects, and is the Japanese working not enough, or the South Koreans keep on pushing the goalposts backwards? Can you comment on that?
First of all, this is a matter of great importance to the United States. It's not just because it affects relations between two of our closest allies and two of our closest friends, but this is a matter that directly affects U.S. interests. So we have long encouraged both Tokyo and Seoul to work harder to address some of the issues between them. And admittedly, these are really difficult issues, long-standing, painful historical issues. But we are obviously pleased that both governments are making a strong effort to address some of these issues. We thought that the summit between Prime Minister Abe and President Park was very positive. I think it was important for the two leaders to meet, have an in-depth discussion on some of the concerns they have. And by all accounts, according to briefings we've received both in Tokyo and Seoul, the meeting really was very productive. And we hope that that will inject some positive momentum as two governments continue their efforts to resolve some of the outstanding issues. I might just note that, this is a very important year, and I think a tremendous opportunity for the two countries to work out some of these outstanding issues. It's not only the 70th anniversary of the end of the war, but it's also the 50th anniversary of the normalization of relations between the two countries.
Thank you, Ambassador. My name is James Yu with the Korean Broadcasting System. Are there any updates with the ongoing six-party talks? Any new concerns or hurdles? Thank you.
I'm not sure you can say ongoing six-party talks. I think what you mean is if any developments in our efforts to pursue denuclearization as North Koreans committed in the six-party process. We remain open to meaningful, productive engagement, and we, I think, made that point very clear to the North Koreans, that if they're ready to talk to us about the central goal of denuclearization, we're willing to meet with them and work together to achieve that goal. In fact, I think that goal is shared very strongly by all of the members of the six-party process, with the exception of North Korea at the moment. I know that the Chinese, the Russians, and of course our allies South Korea and Japan strongly believe that we must continue to pursue denuclearization.
My name is Tom Kim. I have a couple of questions for you. Do you report directly to the president as your predecessors, Bill Perry, Randy Sherman, and Steve Bosworth were supposed to on North Korean issues, as you are North Korea policy representative? According to latest White House fact sheet of ROC-U.S. relations, you've been also named or nominated as the point man for President Park's East Asia Peace Initiative. Are you doing anything on that initiative, and how that jives with the dormant six-party talks and the topic of unification for which the United States officially says it supports?
On your first question, Tong, I believe you know Washington well enough to know that there are many, many levels and layers. But I think a more relevant question is, does this important issue get the kind of senior level attention that it merits or deserves? And there I can tell you categorically, confidently, yes. And when I talk about senior level attention, I'm talking about Secretary of State, I'm talking about the National Security Advisor, and of course the President as well. This is an issue about which we have very serious concerns. And I know there's some commentary about how we are being too strategically patient about this issue. But as you know, that's not exactly our policy. And our policy is actually quite activist. It's to continue to work on maintaining the strongest possible deterrent capability on the peninsula and beyond, making sure that we continue to work on sanctions and pressure to help North Korea move in the right direction, or to try to persuade them to make some strategic decisions. And thirdly, also actively pursuing diplomatic opportunities to resume meaningful negotiations, and also maintaining strong unity among not just the five parties, but more broadly the international community. So yes, the issue gets sufficient senior level attention, and we are continuing to work very hard to try to find a solution to this very difficult issue. On the Northeast Asia Peace and Cooperation Initiative, during President Park's visit, President Obama stated our support publicly in the press conference, but it was also mentioned in the joint fact sheet in which we welcome South Korea's initiative to try to promote regional cooperation. In terms of what I'm doing about it, in fact, I was in Seoul just a little over a week ago because South Korea hosted a high-level governmental meeting on Northeast Asia Peace and Cooperation Initiative. I was there. The Chinese also sent a senior representative, Vice Foreign Minister Liu Jianmin was there. The new Japanese Director General for Asian Affairs, Ishikane, was there. And we had a very, I thought, productive discussion on how we might work together to strengthen regional cooperation and integration on a number of different issues. And I think there will be some concrete follow-up.
Let's take one over here.
Thank you. My name is Sungwon Baek, a reporter with Voice America. Earlier this year, 5 parties of multilateral nuclear dialogue suggested North Korea to hold the exploratory talks where you hold meetings without conditions and confirm the North's sincerity. I was wondering if the suggestion of exploratory talks still valid. The reason that I'm asking is that I had a couple of chances to meet with North Korean diplomats in New York, and their response was quite negative. So again, I was wondering if you if the suggestion is still valid. And another thing is, could you confirm if you have received any response from North Korean side on that specific form of dialogue? Thanks.
I think the idea that we would be willing to sit down with the North Koreans to test their commitment, reaffirm their commitment to denuclearization, I think it's still valid. Unfortunately, North Koreans have shown no interest in any such dialogue. I mean, I hesitate to give names like exploratory, but whatever you want to call it, we have no qualms about sitting down with the North Koreans to talk about denuclearization and how we can work together, the U.S., North Korea, and of course the other members of the six-party process, towards some meaningful negotiations that result in concrete, irreversible denuclearization steps. So I think that idea is still valid, but it's up to the North Koreans, and so far they have shown no interest.
Song Chul with SBS Seoul Broadcasting System from South Korea. I think we are discussing the issue of unification because it is a concrete issue, not an abstract issue in the future. So I'd like to ask you a question on the role of the USFK in the process of unification and beyond that.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I think we would be prepared to provide any kind of support that the Republic of Korea government would desire and need. And I think that applies to the military as well. I mean, I don't want to get into sort of, detailed hypothetical situations, but I think the main principle that we would provide the support that is necessary and needed and requested by the South Korean government applies to the military as well.
Thank you, Son Tae-kwang, Washington correspondent from YTN. This morning, guest speaker was Bill Richardson, Governor Bill Richardson. My understanding is that Mr. Richardson, Governor Richardson, raised an interesting idea that the six-party talks not functioning so long time, so it might be a good time for replacing six-party talks to another platform like international contact group, he said. One of the most different point about contact group from the six-party talks is inviting more countries like Norway, Sweden. Can I have some comments about his idea?
Governor Richardson always has interesting ideas. I think we can keep an open mind about the format, composition, or whatever dialogue. But that does not replace the need for a real commitment from the North Koreans. Whether in the six-party context or whether it's six-party plus Norway and Sweden or bilateral setting, unless the North Koreans are ready to work with us towards common goal, shared goal of denuclearization, it doesn't really matter how many parties you add to the process. But I do think that there is value in maintaining the six-party process because it is in that context that the North Koreans made the most clear commitment to denuclearization. I mean, if you read the joint statement of the six-party talks, it's a wonderful document, and it's very clear what the North Koreans are committing to. So I think we should, continue to push them to live up to their commitments in the six-party process. But if there's some other configuration that would be more productive, sure, we'd be willing to consider it. But I really think fundamentally, the format, parties, etc., is irrelevant as long as North Koreans are showing no interest, no commitment to denuclearization.
Thank you. I'm Jenny Park with the U.S. Journal. Recently, North Korea wants a peace treaty with the United States instead of armistice agreement. How did you respond on this?
You know, it's not that we have no interest in seeking a permanent peace regime, peace mechanism, or peace treaty. But I think they have the order wrong. Before we can get to issues like a peace mechanism to replace the armistice, I think we need to make significant progress on the central issue of denuclearization. It's hard to imagine that we would be willing to sign a peace treaty with a North Korea that continues to pursue dangerous weapons capabilities, both nuclear and missile, that continues to violate human rights of its citizens. So I'm just not sure that proposal has much substance or meaning, because I think Pyongyang understands what's required here. And we need to work on some of the central issues of denuclearization, etc., before we can actually start to talk about a peace mechanism to replace the armistice.
Thank you. Sujin Park, Korea Economic Daily newspaper. There is some controversial issue between United States and Korea, the Southeast China Sea. A few days ago, I met personally the former World Bank President Robert Jolik. He told me that he has some feeling that between United States and Korea, there is no enough conversation and consensus about the China East Sea. And do you agree with that opinion? And if you don't agree, do you have any feeling or your confidence that you have enough consensus or feeling or comment from South Korea leadership?
I think the partnership we have with South Korea is so deep that we do discuss the full range of issues that are relevant to our interests, relevant to South Korea's interests, relevant to regional peace and stability. China and some of its activities and behavior are obviously discussed between the U.S. and Republic of Korea. And I think those discussions are quite full, and I don't sense that there is a need for us to be doing more in coordination, communicating about developments in the region, including some of Chinese behavior.
Told you have time for 2 more questions. If that's okay. Yeah. So we'll take this. Anyone who's not a reporter. No, okay. Well, so over here, and then over here.
Thank you. I used to be a reporter, but not anymore. So, Yan Ho Kim with USKI SAIS. As you mentioned, there's not much going on the nuclear and security front between the U.S. and North Korea, but there are huge changes going on in North Korea in terms of the people's social and economic lives. Market activities booming, and not only the information coming from outside, but the information circulating among the people with, people, more than 2 million people with their cell phones in their hands. So my question is whether that kind of dramatic changes have any impact on U.S. approach to North Korea, or its calculation of how to change the behavior of North Korea? Thank you.
But we're obviously watching very closely developments in North Korea. As you point out, we have heard many anecdotal accounts about growing market activity in different parts of the country. Cell phone use apparently is quite common in Pyongyang. So there are obviously some changes taking place. I'm not sure I would characterize them as dramatic changes. Our sense is that those changes are still very limited to certain pockets of the country. And I don't get the sense that those changes at the moment will lead to sweeping changes in the whole country. We will continue to monitor developments very closely through various means. I mean, I think to the extent that more information appears to be flowing into North Korea, this is something that we want to encourage, right? Because one of the problems for North Korea has been that its citizens have lived in complete isolation, disconnected from the international community, and they just don't know what's outside. And I think it will be useful for the North Korean citizens to know what it's like, what life is like in South Korea and beyond. So we do want to encourage the flow of information into North Korea as much as possible.
There's one final question over here. I'm sorry, I'm a reporter, but yeah, let me ask as one of the big fan of Ambassador.
See, he's a nice reporter.
Oh, nice. Good word, thank you. Let me that's two questions about the dialogue between United States and North Korea. I'm sure you know, I believe you wanted to have a direct talk with your the counterpart with the North Korea, but it seems like North Korea doesn't have any intention to meet you. So, are you optimistic you're going to have a direct talk, direct dialogue with the counterpart of North Korea during the rest of the term of the President Obama? I mean, 1 year plus. And as you know, as we all know, North Korea doesn't have any intention to give up nuclear state. So, if you have this kind of dialogue, how can you make it a constructive talk? And one more thing about China's role. As you know, China and North Korea try to, make the relationship getting better. So how can you, how you expect these two relations make it, make a progress in this, in terms of the peace and the security, stability of the Korean Peninsula? Thank you so much.
Thanks. It's very difficult to be optimistic about any aspect of our effort on North Korea. North Korea has been a very, very difficult partner. And we've seen this throughout our efforts, right? In the 90s, in the agreed framework, more recently with the six-party talks. But I'm not sure if it matters whether we're optimistic or pessimistic. I think the truth is we have to continue to try, because it is simply not an acceptable option for us to recognize North Korea as a nuclear weapon state. And if we cannot recognize them as a nuclear weapon state, then I think we have to continue to make every possible effort to achieve denuclearization on the Korean Peninsula. At some points, I mean, they seem to indicate some interest in direct talks with us. We'll have to see if they renew such interest. I think for us, it's pretty straightforward. If they're willing to talk about the nuclear issue and how we can move towards meaningful, productive, credible negotiations, happy to meet with them anytime, anywhere. China-North Korea relations. As you know, I mean, we continue to believe that China has a special responsibility as not only the chair of the six-party process, but as a country that has very robust ties with North Korea. I think something like 80–90% of North Korea's foreign trade is with China. I mean, that's pretty serious leverage. And of course, they continue to provide substantial assistance, aid to North Korea, and they have a long history together. So I do believe that China continues to have a special responsibility to do more, to try to persuade North Korea back to authentic negotiations and to persuade North Korea to make some strategic decisions going forward. I get the sense that relations between the two countries are probably not as smooth as they had been in the past. But I also get the sense that they do continue to maintain a very robust relationship. So we will continue to call on our colleagues in China to do more, to be more active in bringing the North Koreans and persuading the North Koreans to live up to its international obligations and commitments. I think they can and should do more. This is not to suggest that I believe China has absolute control over North Korea. I don't think that's the case. But there's no question that China has more influence and leverage than anybody else. I mean, that I think there's strong consensus. So we hope Chinese will start to use that leverage more effectively.
Mr. Kim, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ambassador Kim, for taking so many questions. I think we actually have a record number of cameras in the dining room today. But again, thank you, and we will be resuming in the auditorium in about 10 minutes.